effective way of killing the microorganisms. Whereas in bacteriostatic medications, they actually stop growth and replication of bacteria. These antibiotics hold on antibiotics. So you really need your immune system to come and kill the microorganisms. So proper functioning immune system is really necessary when you use bacteriostatic medications. So this is another diagram to show you different, bacteriostatic and bactericidal examples. Actually, under bactericidal, penicillin is the typical example, beta-lactam antibiotics, and metronidazole, which is again used widely in dentistry, and some aminoglycosides and quinolones. They all have bactericidal properties. Whereas tetracycline and some sulfurs and clindamycin and erythromycin, they belong to the category called bacteriostatic. So this medication will stop, growth and multiplication of bacteria. So then we will move into the different categories. Actually, I have listed out 8 categories. The first of all is the penicillins. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first invented antibiotics in clinical practice. So penicillins are divided into 4 main categories. The narrow spectrum, these are the first invented antibiotic, penicillins, penicillin G and B, and later with advancement, they have developed, broadened the spectrum and producing broad spectrum antibiotics, penicillins. Actually, they have added the amino part and, chemically, structurally, and they are called aminopenicillins. Typical examples are amoxicillin, ampicillin, and bactamcillin. So with the use of penicillin, bacteria also develop resistance. So to destroy penicillin, these bacteria have produced penicillinase. So in the practice, so clinicians have a challenge to produce antibiotics against this bacterial resistance strains. So they have produced penicillinase resistant penicillin. So they are known as anti-staphylococcal penicillin. Under that, fluoxacillin, dicloxacillin, and methicillin are the typical examples. So even with the use of this medication, some bacteria have further developed resistance to some of these medications. So known drug is the methicillin resistant staphylococci. That is the major culprit or major organisms found in hospital-acquired infections. This is another antibiotic that is called extended spectrum penicillins group. They belong to the anti-pseudomonas penicillin because these penicillins are effective against pseudomonas species. Because pseudomonas is supposed to be another lethal infections with high morbidity and mortality. Actually, this is also one of the common organisms seen in hospital-acquired infections. So under that category, piperacillin, piperacillin, and carbonicillin are the known products. So here you have beta-lactamase inhibitors, that is penicillinase enzyme inhibitors, clavulanic acid, sulbactam, and tazobactam. Actually, these medications are combined, actually used in combination with this group with broad spectrum penicillin or extended spectrum penicillin. For example, you have got amoxicillin and clavulanic acid preparation. That is more effective than amoxicillin. And of course, they have a synergistic effect because one enhances the other's activity. That is well-known product is there in the market, amoxicillin, clavulanic acid. Again, you get ampicillin can be combined with sulbactam. That is, preparations are there. Even piperacillin with clavulanic acid is a very powerful, antibiotic, usually reserved for severe infections. That is so much about the penicillin products. As you can see, these are some of the penicillin products which are resistant to MRSA. This is the sensitive organisms are marked with this X sign, and these are not sensitive. Amoxicillin, the Staphylococcus MRSA is resistant to this medication. Most of the penicillins and beta-lactam antibiotics are resistant to staphylococcal MRSA strains. These are the first invented penicillins. Penicillin G is the IV preparation and penicillin B is the oral preparation. Actually, G and B stand for what? Actually, nobody knows what they stand for. Probably BC and G, people suggest G is for gold standard because at that time there was no any chemical substance, to combat against bacteria, and penicillin was the first drug. So penicillin G is the first preparation which is actually not stable in acids. So it has to be given in parenteral route. The first penicillin produced is given parenterally. Later, they developed the technique and produced acid-resistant, gastric acid-resistant penicillins that is called oral penicillin. The main uses of penicillin in clinical practice is dental infection. So that is the main indication for penicillin in medicine as well as in dentistry. So they are also effective against bacteremia and endocarditis and actinomycosis and some of the chronic infections. So penicillin actually also given in oropharyngeal infections like tonsillitis and pharyngitis, and dose is 4 times a day. So which is less convenient compared to the amoxicillin, which is given 3 times a day. So broad spectrum penicillin, these are the 2 penicillin which are used widely in our practice, ampicillin and amoxicillin. You can see the differences. Actually, spectrum-wise, they don't have much spectrum. They both have a almost similar spectrum here. But amoxicillin has better bioavailability once it is given. It's 90% is available in tea. And actually presence of food in the stomach actually affect absorption of ampicillin. The presence of food in the stomach does not affect absorption of amoxicillin. And the level of other tissue plate I told you earlier, with amoxicillin it is very high, with ampicillin it is less. Another thing is the side effects are also considered less compared to the amoxicillin. Because of this long duration of action in the serum, amoxicillin can be given 3 times a day and the ampicillin has to be given 4 times a day. So therefore, amoxicillin has better compliance by the patient compared to the ampicillin, which need to be taken 4 times a day. So that is the main reason why amoxicillin is the drug of choice in our main practice. Sorry. So these are the side effects of penicillin. The main side effect of penicillin is the hypersensitivity. You can get, local hypersensitivity reaction to the life-threatening anaphylaxis reactions. Therefore, use of penicillin is very limited in the hospital practice or even in the private practice because of the possibility of hypersensitivity reaction. In addition, it has got other side effects and sodium, potassium, ionic disturbances, especially with the IV preparations, and nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and all these gastrointestinal complications, which is very common with any oral drug. So under beta-lactam antibiotics, next group is the cephalosporins, which is very much similar to the penicillin in structure as well as in the spectrum. It is first discovered in 1945 after penicillins and available in the market in 1964. It's slightly different in structure, can be used in penicillin allergy. Actually, there is a cross sensitivity. About 5 to 10% of penicillin allergy patients can be allergic to cephalosporin, but still 90% is not. So it's up to the clinician to decide whether cephalosporin can be used in the penicillin allergic situations. So because of the slightly different chemical structure, they are resistant to penicillinase. So drug was introduced to the market in 1964, and it is going on like this. And you have got several generations. So first generation means 1964, then the second generation. The basically these, first generations is, effective against gram-positive organisms. So as, generation progresses, they develop the, property of, effectiveness towards the gram-negative organisms. So second generation, the slightly expanded activity, better cell penetration, and they are slightly, resistant to beta-lactamase and less potent against gram-positive, whereas more active against the gram-negative. So these properties have been, developed more and more in third generations, fourth generations, and fifth generations. So in this slide, you can see the first generations are more effective against the gram-positives. So as it's born, it is, less effective, but more effective against gram-negative organisms. So I have grouped, several generations of cephalosporin here. First generation, second generation, third generation. There are so many names, difficult to remember, but anybody can, always refer DNF or any drug formulary book to find out which preparation belong to what, generation of cephalosporin. So how to remember these cephalosporin classifications? I have just, went through this and actually got this slide. Actually, first generations of cephalosporins, starting from these, actually they get these letters in their name. FA, PHA, PHRA. So you can see all these letters. If you see these letters, they belong to the first generation. Third generation, they have the letters IME, O1 and 10. So if, preparation, ending with these, letters, that belongs to the third generation. And similarly, if you find these two letters PI here, that belongs to the fourth generation. If, preparations have three letters together like ROL, that, belongs to the fifth generation. So these fifth generation medicines are highly reserved for severe infections, and these can be the first line medications in our practice. So this is again, you can see the slide for generation, and as generation progresses, gram-negative activity improves and positive activity decreases, and this way it is increases. And actually, the ability to penetration to CSF is, getting, more and more here, and it could be, considered in CNS infection. So that is about penicillins. Then we will move to the other group, macrolides, that also have several generations. First generation, this is a very known product and very familiar name to everyone, erythromycin. You have second generation, clarithromycin and azithromycin, and more advanced third generation is there, that is clarithromycin. So spectrum of antibacterial activity, somewhat similar to penicillins. It is effective against gram-positive and little effective against the gram-negative organisms, and they are again resistant to penicillinase producing organism because of the different macrolide structure. So as generation advances, spectrum become more broader and broader, and you get improved pharmacokinetic properties like better bioavailability and better tissue penetration, and they have prolonged half-life, and it will be well tolerated by GI tract as, generation advances. These are the three commonly used macrolides in our practice: erythromycin, clarithromycin, azithromycin. So you can see these effect of food and absorption. Actually, presence of food in the stomach affects absorption of erythromycin, but it doesn't affect absorption of clarithromycin and azithromycin. So GI intolerance is the major problem with all the macrolides. So the erythromycin is well known for all these, gastrointestinal, side effects of macrolides. But as the generation progresses, clarithromycin, azithromycin, you can see no or little effect. Prolonged tissue levels, not here, but yes, in clarithromycin and azithromycin. So T half is more. So the frequency of antibiotics, the timing is less here, but erythromycin, you need to give more frequent than this medication. So drug intolerance by GI tract, erythromycin is the worst, but azithromycin has least effect on gastrointestinal tract. So main side effects in regard to the macrolides are gastrointestinal, upset, so severe nausea, vomiting, epigastric pain, diarrhea, and that kind of, GI side effects. And the other thing is, it affects the heart rhythm. QT time in the ECG can get prolonged. So it is more, prominent with erythromycin. Actually, when erythromycin is given with antihistamine, that action will get more prolonged. So be careful when you prescribe erythromycin and antihistamine together, especially in arrhythmia patients. So as with all macrolides, they all have hepatic toxicity, and they can, cause jaundice because of, hepatic involvement. So macrolides, the main problem with macrolides, with, all of these, gastrointestinal intolerance, but, azithromycin has the least effect. So that is actually due to direct stimulation of, gut motility. And actually that is the main reason for discontinuing erythromycin and substituting for any other drugs in our practice. So uses of macrolides, main indication is penicillin allergy, and there are other indications as well. So any infection involved in the upper respiratory tract, like penicillin, but this can, actually can be given in, like situation like sinusitis and bronchitis and, all upper respiratory tract infections. So this could be considered in, rhinosinusitis, which also can come across in our practice. So they are effective against gram-positive infection. So after that, we move to the third group, that is tetracyclines. So they are the broadest, out of those three, compared to penicillin and cephalosporin, these are the broadest, spectrum of activity. It is active against both gram-positive and gram-negative, as well as some intracellular, parasites or microorganisms like spirochetes, mycoplasma, and rickettsia, and chlamydia. So tetracyclines are classified according to the duration of actions. These are short-acting, tetracycline. Actually, in that group, you get tetracycline and oxytetracycline. The long-acting group, you get doxycycline and minocycline. So therefore, dosage for tetracycline is, 6 times a day because of this low short-acting, capacity. So minocycline and doxycycline can be given, in single dose or twice a day regime per day. So it is an advantage of patients who don't stick to the time schedule. So pharmacokinetics. So when tetracycline is given with some of these medications or food, mainly, food rich in cations, calcium, aluminum, calcium actually you get in dairy products, aluminum you get in antacids, and even iron preparations. When you take this preparation with tetracycline, they form a precipitate in the, gut, and none of them will get absorbed into the body. So the both will go waste. So better not to do tetracycline with this medication when you prescribe in tetracycline. So in addition to the antibacterial effect, tetracycline has some other properties as well. So tetracycline has got against inflammation because of, inhibition of these factors. So it is an antibiotic with anti-inflammatory properties. So that is why it is given in some of the chronic inflammations like chronic periodontitis, even in chronic prostatitis, and, some of the chronic inflammatory disorders, tetracycline is chosen as the drug of choice. And tetracycline also inhibits some tissue degrading enzymes like collagenase and bone resorbing factors. So therefore, again, it has a place in the treatment of periodontal disease, because in periodontal disease, you get collagen destruction and bone destruction together. And it also prevents angiogenesis. So therefore, people say it has got some anti-tumor activity as well. So tetracycline, for those reasons, highly effective in treating periodontal disease, because they say concentration in gingival crevicular fluid is 2 to 10 times more than the blood. So it gets concentrated in gingival fluid and can act against the gingival microorganisms. So ability to concentrate in periodontal pockets and inhibit the growth of AA organisms, Actinobacillus, Actinomyces transplantans, and it has an anticollagenase activity and bone regeneration capacity. Because of these properties, tetracycline has a major role in treatment of periodontal diseases. So what warning do you give for the patient when you prescribe tetracycline? Actually, you have to say that not to, I described about this, not to take milk, antacids or iron. Actually, you have to take with plenty of water. So that is because some tetracycline preparations have a gelatinous capsule. It can adhere to the esophageal mucosa. So, and it can get stomach, stuck in the stomach. So therefore, you have to take with, plenty of water. And even some people advise to stay upright for half an hour after taking a tetracycline capsule of oils. And avoid exposure to sun, because it can exhibit photosensitivity reaction. You get allergic reactions when you get exposed to sun if you have taken tetracycline. And better, even don't take if you are pregnant. So what will happen if you take during pregnancy? So if tetracycline taken during pregnancy and neonatal period can cause discoloration of primary and secondary teeth. So during pregnancy, it can cross the placental barrier and go into the fetal circulation and affect enamelogenesis and dentigenesis and affect primary teeth. So if it is taken, the neonate is taken, given these antibiotics within this period, you get discoloration of teeth, both enamel and dentine in the permanent teeth, and which is irreversible and anesthetic, manifestation to the patient. So we have, discussed about, few antibiotics. So I think it is getting bored or monotonous. Shall we, go for a little, questions, sessions, or, just to check, audience, interest. Over to you, Kalani.
Okay, sir. Right. So I will start launching the first question now.
Can I have the results, Kalani?
Yes, almost about 50% has, 55% has voted by now. So shall we end the poll now?
Or shall we wait for?
Shall we wait for a few
yes.
At least 75%.
75%, yes.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. I will now end the poll. And this is the results, sir.
Yeah, very interesting. As majority think, the correct answer is A and B, 4th generation cephalosporin and tetracycline. I think 46% have got right. Okay, shall we move to the other one?
Yeah, sure, sir.
Shall we have the results?
Okay, so the response rate was not very fast. That's
right. Okay.
Maybe they want some time to think.
All right.
Yes. Shall we? 52% has voted, sir. Shall we end?
Right. Yeah, it shall be there.
Okay, here are the results, sir.
Actually, the answer is D. It is very simple. Tetracycline taken in pregnancy causes discoloration of permanent teeth. That is false. So only 20% have got the correct answer. Actually, penicillin G is the treatment choice for viridans group of streptococcal endocarditis, because it is very effective against penicillin G is very effective against endocarditis. So it is correct answer. This is correct. This is correct. And this is the false, incorrect answer. And this is also incorrect. Shall we move to the other one?
Right.
Have they finished voting, Kalani?
Not really, sir. So about 60% has answered by now. So shall I end the, yeah, we should be moving.
Correct. I think most of the audience have a very good memory, short memory, and they remember everything, and 61% have got it correct.
Shall we move on to the next one, sir?
Yes.
Okay, so here are the results, sir.
Very surprised. In fact, actually, I couldn't mention the correct answer is clindamycin. Actually, that has got both, bacteriostatic in low concentration, bactericidal in higher concentrations like erythromycin. Metronidazole is purely a bactericidal drug. Cephalosporin, again, bactericidal. So only clindamycin has got that property. The correct answer is B. Actually, I couldn't, mention in my lecture, so these attendees can be excused for that.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Just move on, sir. Go to the next slide.
Right. I'll do that.
Just, yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we have discussed about, 3 or 4 group of antibacterial agents. Now we move on to the aminoglycosides. Actually, these drugs are not much used in dentistry or even in OMF surgery, but there are medications which are which are used in dentistry as well as in OMF surgery in certain cases. So gentamicin, which is used, and the streptomycin that has been used in the past. Actually, when penicillin was given as the #1 choice for dental infection, he always added streptomycin to enhance the effect of penicillins. Actually, again, penicillin and streptomycin has got synergistic effect because one enhances the other activity. Because of that, when you use penicillin intravenous, we always use streptomycin in the past in dental infections, even in bacterial endocarditis, caused by, when penicillin is or ampicillin is given, it is, combined with streptomycin. Gentamicin is the medication we use it to some extent, and topical aminoglycosides like neomycin is used as topical preparations. So even in aminoglycosides, you get several generations. The first invented streptomycin belonged to the first generation. Gentamicin is in the second generation, and the amikacin is in the third generation. So neomycin actually is not used, systematically because as a oral or IV preparation because of a lot of side effects. Streptomycin has been developed. Actually it is given in certain cases, as I discussed earlier. And gentamicin is the medication which we use in our practice very often. So when you take spectrum of activity, all aminoglycosides, they are effective against MRSA organism, which is an added advantage when using aminoglycosides. And they all are basically effective against gram-negative organisms. So as I told you, gentamicin is given, synergistically with ampicillin, penicillin, and ticagrelor, with all these penicillin preparations to get, more, effective. So gentamicin is more effective than streptomycin. It is effective against Pseudomonas infections as well. But, as you know, streptomycin is given for tuberculosis as an antituberculous drug. But when it comes to gentamicin, it is not effective against tuberculosis strains, but relatively nephrotoxic. So be careful when you use with the patients with kidney issues. So gentamicin, when you say gentamicin, it is used for severe infections, especially in immunocompromised patients. So it is severe infection is marked with septicemia and sepsis. So it is, used adjuvant with penicillin. So other indication for use of gentamicin, I told you earlier, bacterial endocarditis. It is effective against Pseudomonas, but even in Pseudomonas infection, the action will be, fortified with using picatinny. So other group is nitroimidazoles. The known preparation is metronidazole. They are synthetic antibiotics or antibacterial agents which basically have an antiprotozoal activity. They have added antibacterial activity. These medications are bactericidal. So first generation metronidazole, second generation and more effective preparation is tinidazole. So metronidazole was initially introduced, to treat Trichomonas vaginitis. Actually, it is a protozoal disease. But later they identify it has got antibacterial properties. So therefore, it was used in anaerobic bacterial infections associated with oral cavity, gastrointestinal and female genital tract. So it is a drug of choice in acute ulcerative gingivitis, which is caused by Fusobacteria and what is that? Vincent angina, Fusobacterial complex, spirochetal complex. So usually metronidazole is given with either with amoxicillin or augmentin. So combination of metronidazole and amoxicillin has been reported particularly effective against the treatment of AA organism which is associated with periodontitis. So indications for metronidazole in our clinical practice, mainly anaerobic infections. This is another infection we will discuss little later. Clostridium difficile infection, H. pylori, which is associated with peptic ulcer disease, and these all are parasitic diseases. So adverse reactions to metronidazole, the known ones are the metallic taste and gastrointestinal disturbances like severe nausea and vomiting. Actually, when you take, alcohol with metronidazole, you get dalsalpidem-like reactions. That is very unpleasant, range of, signs and symptoms like, abdominal cramps, headache, nausea, vomiting, and facial. The disulpidem is a drug used in chronic alcoholism to stop alcohol. So when you take the alcohol while you are disulpidem, you get this reaction. Even with metronidazole, if you take alcohol with metronidazole, you get the similar kind of reaction. So the metabolism of warfarin will get inhibited by action of metronidazole. Therefore, warfarin action will be prolonged and can cause bleeding in patients who are on warfarin. So be careful with when you are using, metronidazole preparation with, on patient who is on warfarin. So indications, the safety against pregnancy. Actually, pregnancy category according to FDA, it is B. It is relatively safe to use in pregnancy, but with cautions. So if it is really indicated, you can use it, but better to avoid in first trimester of pregnancy. But during lactation, if it is given to the neonate, the milk will be excreted, the drug will be excreted with the milk, and milk will get this, the metallic taste, and baby will not like the milk. So therefore, during lactation time, metronidazole is not recommended. So this is the FDA category for different antibiotics. Amoxicillin got the again B rank. So doxycycline got the D. So that is not safe because of the the previous side effects I have mentioned. And this metronidazole here, that also B, but can be used in pregnancy with caution. But my advice is better to avoid in the first trimester in pregnancy. But in other period, if it is really indicated and if there is no replacement, you can go with metronidazole. So second generation nitramidazole, the tinidazole is the preparation. So this is becoming more popular and popular because of longer duration of action. So it doesn't need to be given 3 times a day. Even single day, single dose of, tinidazole is enough, per day. And it, very simple dosing regime in that case and better toxicity profile compared to the metronidazole. So then we will move to the next one, quinolones and fluoroquinolones. Actually, they are synthetic chemotherapeutic antibacterial agents which has a broad spectrum activity with bactericidal activity. So these medications, actually the parent compound is nalidixic acid, which is used in urinary tract. That is the first generation of quinolones. Actually, later this was developed and the spectrum has been broadened to develop into second generation, and then they will be effective with other systems as well in addition to the GU tract. So spectrum has become broader, gram positive and gram negative, and the second generation ciprofloxacin and ofloxacin, they are used in dentistry, and even the third generation, they are more and more effective with, lesser side effects. But remember, they are not indicated in orofacial infections as a first-line medication unless it is detected by culture sensitivity test. So, because you have got other drugs which with better antimicrobial spectrum, they are readily available in the market. So, really, you don't need to go for these medications unless it is indicated otherwise. So, the prescribed in dentistry, usually we do it if a patient is allergic to penicillin and has substantial side effects to the gastrointestinal system with erythromycin and clindamycin. In that case, this medication cannot be used. So therefore, in those situations, the quinolones are indicated. So they have side effects. We will go into that. This is, the fluoroquinolone users. Actually, they penetrate well into the soft and hard tissues, into the bones. So therefore, it is used in oral infections because you get bone, hard tissue, and soft tissues in this region. And penetrate well into the bone, and it is also effective against respiratory tract infections. Therefore, it can be used in sinusitis situations as well. So the side effects are, it is given in children below 8 years, below 18 years. It can cause cartilaginous damage and affect the growth of the children. So therefore, children under 18 years of age, this medication is not, not approved or not indicated. And it is not indicated, actually safe to use in pregnancy. And because of these injuries, the tendon injuries, it is not, indicated for people who engage in sport activity. So these drugs again can be used in periodontal diseases. So if periodontal disease is resistant to, conventional treatment, these drugs can be used to control the disease. So ciprofloxacin can be combined with metronidazole to be more effective, and the combination is very effective against the AA organism, which is again, I told you earlier, it's a common organism seen in the chronic periodontal diseases. So now we have moved to the last group of antibiotics, that is, lymphosamide group, that is, lymphomycin and clindamycin. Because I have added, because we use clindamycin in, more severe dental infections. So better to have a look at that medication as well. So it is not a broad spectrum antibiotic, it's a narrow spectrum. In low concentration, it is bacteriostatic. In higher concentration, it is bactericidal. So it is effective against anaerobic organism as well as, staphylococcal organism, including MRSA. But which is not effective against Pseudomonas infections. Therefore, in hospital-acquired infections, this is not really indicated. So remember, this is, although the name is mycin, it does doesn't belong to the category called macrolides like erythromycin and other azithromycin. So don't get confused with that terminology. So clindamycin clinical users, again, like ciprofloxacin or quinolone, they penetrate well into the soft tissues, hard tissues, as well as the infected tissues. So therefore, it has a place in the dental infections. So it is used in necrotizing fasciitis, because of, MRSA, so, it is effective again MRSA organisms. So therefore, it can be used in this, severe infection called necrotizing fasciitis, and even MRSA soft tissue infections. You can use this clindamycin preparation. So one of the side effects of clindamycin, preparation is this, diarrhea caused by Clostridium difficile enterocolitis. That is, very troublesome conditions. So use of clindamycin in dentistry, mainly it can be used as a prophylaxis for bacterial endocarditis in indicated cases, as well as in osteomyelitis, because it penetrates well into the infected bone tissues. So pyogenic osteomyelitis, cases like osteoradionecrosis and osteohemonecrosis, this clindamycin is indicated, and it need to be given in long-term basis. So again, clindamycin also can be used in periodontal diseases. So again, resistant cases, you can use clindamycin in long term, starting with 7 to 10 days, or even you can go up to 2 to 3 weeks, and it can be used in acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis and deep-seated odontogenic infections, as well as in osteomyelitis of the jaw bones. So main drawback of clindamycin preparation is the pseudomembranous enterocolitis. That is because of overgrowth of this strains called Clostridium difficile. Actually, people will develop diarrhea. If they develop continuous that diarrhea, better to stop this preparation. Actually speaking, the pseudomembranous enterocolitis can happen with any medications. But for so unfortunate reasons, clindamycin has the tag of having fatal pseudomembranous enterocolitis. But it is not so common in our clinical practice. So these are some of the antibiotics listed in periodontology. You can use metronidazole alone or in combination with these medications. It can be used with amoxicillin, cephalosporin, even with the tetracyclines and clindamycin and ciprofloxacin to be more effective in refractory periodontal diseases. So now I am coming to the end of my presentation. So antibiotics are prescribed mainly for bacterial infections as a part of therapeutic. So it is also, prescribed in prophylaxis basis. So in the actually preventing getting of bacterial infections, mainly, wound infection or surgical site infections, or even in as a, prophylaxis against bacterial endocarditis. So I am not going to go, to discuss this, topic in details because of the time factor. So these are some of the rules you need to, remind when you prescribing antibiotic prescriptions. So antibiotics, whether they are indicated on clinical ground on your patients. So have you done appropriate investigations before prescribing it? So what organisms are likely cause your infections or the patient's problem? Which agent is best for that particular condition? Is an appropriate combinations are best? Is any host factor relevant, whether patient is immunocompetent or immunodeficient or having chronic debilitating medical illnesses? So what is the best route of administration? So what is the appropriate dose? And can therapy be modified when lab results are available after culture and sensitivity test, if whether it is modified? Or what is the optimal duration of therapy? If you have got answers to these 10 questions, you are ready to prescribe antibiotics in your practice. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Kalani.
Right. Okay, sir. So we have one more last question.
Yeah, actually, we have one more last question. Can I have that question, please?
Yes, sir.
Are they still voting?
Yes, sir. Still.
Yeah, we wait for at least 50% to,
Yes, sir. That's. So I'm sharing the results now.
Yeah, it's happy to see that, majority have got the correct answer. Actually, these all 5 answers are correct, but you get better results with, little time with, if you follow the regime of the amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, metronidazole, gentamicin. I think 55% have got that answer right.
Okay, sir. So thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, sir, with a lot of information, which is definitely going to help our clinicians. And we have a few questions as well. So shall we move on to the Q&A?
Yes, Kalani. Yes, Kalani. You can.
Yes, the first question is from Dr. Harindra Janadasa, one of our registrars. He's asking, impacted third molar removal is a clean surgery. Does it need post-operative antibiotic cover? Value your opinion.
Yeah, very good, question, I would say. Unfortunately, I did not move into that part. Yes, you said, surgical site infection is one of the, main indication for use of antibiotics in our practice. Actually, surgical wounds can be classified as, he mentioned, clean, contaminated, and dirty. Actually, clean surgeries are done on clean skin. So this is not a skin surgery. So it is not a clean operation. So this is called contaminated surgery. If there is a inflammation around that region, it can become clean contaminated surgery. Actually, sorry, clean contaminated. What are the 4 regimes I said? Clean surgery, contaminated surgery. Clean contaminated is mucosal with inflammation. Dirty surgery if pus is present. So impacted third molar definitely fall into the category of either contaminated, clean contaminated or dirty surgery. So those surgeries has about 20% chance of surgical site infections. So therefore, antibiotic can be considered. But you have to take case by case scenarios. If it is there is no infections and if patient is immunocompetent patient, young patient with no evidence of infections and clean surgery, you have not broken the septic the aseptic technique. In that case, I don't think. But if there is evidence of infection and if patient is compromised, the antibiotic regime is indicated in third molar surgery.
Right. So shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
This is again from one of our registrars, Dr. Prasangi Piris. She's asking, what is your antibiotic regime when you perform ABGs?
What is my antibiotic regime?
When you perform ABGs?
Yeah. Actually, it is a burning question in our society right now. Yes, what I use is clindamycin. Actually, because the ABG is a very frequent surgery I have been doing for last 10, 12 years. Actually, the reason for using clindamycin as a prophylaxis in that case, because ABG, during ABG surgery, you are communicating with nasal cavity as well as oral cavity. So nasal cavity, we have found lot of staph organisms which are MRSA positive. Actually, 55% of our patients are MRSA positive. So on the oral side, actually you get anaerobic organisms. So and basically periodontal pockets and things like that, you get anaerobic environment. And basically clindamycins are effective against both strains. I mean both group of bacteria. Another thing is that clindamycin is very well penetrated into the bone tissue. So when you do a ABG procedure at the very beginning, your graft is a pre-graft. So it is just bounded by the surrounding bone. If surrounding bone is very rich in antibiotics, which are very sure, then your bone will be protected right now. So you have a clindamycin barrier right from your bone graft for 10 plus 2 weeks. So therefore, we use clindamycin antibiotics for first 2 weeks as a prophylactic antibiotic. Actually, we make this decision with the consultation of microbiologists. That is always a good idea. So she also, agreed with that. With that, regime, we haven't got any post-operative complications like secondary infections or very few complications. So then actually they say that go ahead, you use the same antibiotic regime. So we stick to that. Any?
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we have quite a number of foreign attendees as well. So this one is from Dr. Atula Veerakon. He says, "Hi Sunil, listening with interest for 4.5 hours away. Is there a move to use antibiotics judicially to prevent antimicrobial resistance?"
Yes, hi Atula. After a very long time, nice to hear that you have been watching me. Right. Okay, Atula. Right. The antibacterial. Can I have the question again, Kalani?
Yeah. Is there a move to use antibiotics judicially to prevent antimicrobial resistance?
Yeah, antibacterial resistance is a major concern actually in European countries where you live. Actually, it is a general concern among the clinicians, antibacterial resistance. Actually, there is in our country, actually the use of antibacterial agents are more, liberally we use antibiotics. So there is no, ethics or rules and regulations, strict rules and regulations imposed on clinicians like in other countries. For example, in our people, they can go to the pharmacy and buy any antibacterial agents that they want. But if you have restrictions at different level, then you can limit the use of antibiotics. Thereby, you can control the development of antibacterial resistance. So in our country, yes, our clinicians are thinking about this antibacterial resistance, and they take the the precautions to prevent development of resistant strains. It is happening in the clinical side, but it is not a legal requirement in our country. Okay.
Right. Thank you, sir. And moving to another question by Dr. Sumudu Madavala. Sir, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. What is your opinion on surgical prophylaxis in Sri Lankan setup?
Yes, Sumudu, actually I answered to that question at the very beginning. Surgical prophylaxis, actually it's a different subject altogether. We can discuss hours and hours on that. Actually, this majority of antibiotics are actually prescribed for surgical prophylaxis than the infections in our practice. Actually, surgical prophylaxis, you have to follow that regime. Your surgery, as I told you earlier, whether it is a clean surgery, contaminated surgery, clean contaminated surgery, or dirty surgery. So if you are working, and actually the rate of surgical site infections in clean surgery is less than 2%. In dirty surgery, it can go up to 30 to 40%. So when you are working with, dirty surgery is when you see infections pass in your surgical field. In that case, you have to, go for a surgical prophylaxis and depend on the area you operate. So you have to take a lot of, factors into consideration when you take the, antibiotic prophylaxis in surgical operation. For example, if you are doing a parotidectomy surgery, what kind of surgery is that? Actually, it is a clean surgery. Sometimes you can say little bit contaminated because your parotid, surgical wound can be connected to the oral cavity via parotid duct. But basically, it is a clean surgery. So actually speaking, if you have, if patient is, immunocompetent, and if you have, follow the complete, aseptic technique and things like that, actually speaking, no antibiotics is necessary. But if you think that, there, and the hours, the duration of surgery, if you have a surgery within, 30 minutes, half an hour, clean surgery, you don't need. But if you have a surgery hours and hours, and with microsurgical, anastomosis, people spend more than 12 and 18 hours. In those cases, definitely there is a big role in antibiotics in surgical prophylaxis. So that is the answer I can give you, Sumudhu.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. And we are getting a lot of questions. And there's another one, sir. Can you explain usage of antibiotics in case with dry socket? That is from Dr. W.A. Jayasuriya.
Yeah, it is again a question, very common question in dental practice. Actually speaking, you should not use antibiotics for dry socket, because patients are demanding for some medications, and you tend to write antibiotics. Actually speaking, there is no place in the treatment of the dry socket treatment, no place for antibiotics. What you need is proper pain control regime, and local cleaning, irrigation, and place some kind of a surgical dressing which can kill your the bone pain, probably zinc oxide, and there are some commercial preparations available, and just keep it, and just avoid other factors. But one more thing to tell you, you can prevent happening of dry socket if you give antibiotic prophylactically. If you can give preparations like metronidazole, or some kind of gram medication effective against gram negative organisms, even amoxicillin beforehand. Actually, there are papers which have shown reduced incidence of dry socket if you have given antibiotics pre-operatively before dental extraction, but not to treat, not as a treatment of dry socket. No antibiotics.
Right, so again, moving on to a question by a foreign attendee, Dr. Andi Angun Putri, and is asking, sometimes clinicians do prescribe doxycycline mouthwash for treating the oral ulceration. Is it can be accepted for rational use of antibiotics?
No, actually it is accepted. I told you tetracycline has got anti-inflammatory property. So, most of the oral ulcers happen due to inflammation. So that's a rationale of using, any kind of tetracycline preparation as a mouthwash, as well as you can get secondary infection, bacterial secondary infection. So there is definitely place of tetracycline antibiotic mouthwash. Probably better to use with some antifungal agents as well, because it is a broad spectrum antibiotics and you can get superinfection with candidal organisms. So you can use tetracycline with antifungal agents like local antifungal agents like nystatin, tetracycline, nystatin, and aspirin. The combination is a well-known drug for controlling herpetic herpetiform after ulceration.
Okay, so the next one is from Dr. Yogan. Which is the best choice of drug to prescribe in combination with metronidazole for dental infections in a patient who is allergic to both penicillin and cephalosporins?
That is a very good question. In fact, I want to hand over that question to the audience. Yeah, patient is both allergic to
penicillin and cephalosporins.
Of course. Then, of course, you have a choice, erythromycin. That is the drug, we use, in day-to-day practice. But the problem is erythromycin is, GI tract intolerance. So if patient has that issues, you can go for quinolone antibiotics, that is ciprofloxacin, which is very well penetrated into the dental and oral soft tissue. So in those cases, actually ciprofloxacin is indicated with metronidazole. So it is the drug to consider in that situation, I hope. But remember, ciprofloxacin or quinolones are not the first-line antibiotics for treating, dental infection.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. And another question from Dr. Harendra. In ongoing orofacial infection, do we want to prescribe the antibiotics first, or do we want to remove the cause first?
Harendra, that is the surgical principles of treating, basic principles of treating infection is get the cause out of your way. So even without antibiotics, by removing the causative agent, body will look after, body will heal. So antibiotics is an adjuvant treatment for surgical procedures. Always go for the surgical procedures. like extractions, IND, decompression, any kind of surgical procedure will definitely help to, in the healing process of dental infection. Remove the pores as early as possible. But I understand when there is an acute inflammation and unable to open the mouth, it's very difficult to operate, inside the mouth. Probably in that case, general anesthesia can be.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. That is by Dr. Asanga Gunatilaka. What is the alternative antibiotic for doxycycline if patient is suffering from esophagitis for the treatment of chronic periodontal disease?
Yes, actually, I have listed out some of the drugs which are used in periodontal diseases. Actually, this alternative to doxycycline, you can go for macrolides, right? I mean, definitely macrolides, even ciprofloxacin. They can be combined with metronidazole. So, but the thing is, they have their own limitation of use. For example, ciprofloxacin, ciprofloxacin cannot be given in pregnancy and early children. So, if that is also contraindication, then in that case, probably you can use erythromycin or even clindamycin, but they are not the number one choice. So first, always go for even amoxicillin can be considered in using long-term infections. Erythromycin can be given in low dosage, like what you prescribe in facial acne, skin acne. You can give erythromycin to or a long-term acting macrolides, low dose in long-term basis.
So there are a few questions on systemic diseases as well, the use of antibiotics when the patient is having systemic diseases. Since we are running out of time, I would select one question and forward it to you, sir.
Okay.
This one is from Dr. Ramya. Sir, please advise on dose adjustments of antibiotics in patients with chronic kidney diseases.
Yeah, it is another lesson altogether. But yes, I mean, simple thing is dose adjustment has to be done according to the kidney function test. So you have to find out creatine levels, creatine clearance, and all these things. And there are formulas, to calculate the level of medicine required for according to the level of kidney functions. So you can always refer BNF or any other medical guide. It will give you. But the thing is, you have to assess the level of kidney function first, according to the creatine clearance. And according to that, you can adjust the dosage of drug with the, there are formulas. You can put those figures into those formulas and calculate the dose according to the level of, kidney failure, renal failure, the level of kidney failure.
Right. With that, we have few more questions, but I think we need, because the time is a fact, we need to wind up the session. And with that, I would like to congratulate sir and thank you very much for the dedicated work done in order to enhance the knowledge of our dental fraternity. And for the participants, I would like to inform you that our next webinar will be on next coming Sunday. That would be the 12th Sunday at the same time. And the topic will be on COVID-19, the environmental perspective. So we will be posting about the details later and hope that you all will be joining us soon. Thank you very much.